So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fidel Rodriquez. I'm also initiated Babalao in the Ifa tradition. My initiated name is Ifa Sheye, so feel free to call me either Fidel or Ifa Sheye. I'm also a Stewardship Council member of the Youth Passageways, have been for almost 2 years. And also I represent Spreading Seeds, Mind, Body, Spirit, Rites of Passage, Mentorship Leadership Program here in LA. I work all throughout LA County. And I'm also here in Los Angeles, California. And my cultural background is Chumash, Mexican, some Spanish blood and African blood all mixed up in there. And so I've been, first and foremost, very honored that Youth Passageways asked me to say a little prayer of intention, putting some positive intentions into this gathering that we're going to embark on the 21st of April, next month, right around the corner, especially because one of my elders, somebody who has been there for me through thick and thin, is also on the call, Luis Rodriguez. So for me to be able to do this in his presence, humbling. So thank you for everything you've done for me, Luis. I want to first open up with this little poem that I found by the Coast Salish up in the Canada area, and it's on children. So I found it very appropriate to bring this intention in. And it goes, children were encouraged to develop strict discipline and a high regard for sharing. When a girl picked her first berries and dug her first roots, they were given away to an elder so she would share her future success. When a child carried water for the home, an elder would give compliments, pretending to taste meat and water carried by a boy or berries in that of a girl. The child was encouraged not to be lazy and to go straight like a sapling. Mourning dove. So I found that appropriate for our intention, because this is all about the children and obviously the adults and the elders that form our communities. At this time, I would like everybody to think about their ancestors. This is about invoking and honoring our ancestors. That's part of the intention for this gathering. So I'm going to recite a poem, a prayer in the Ifa tradition, and I also recite it in English, invoking my Chumash ancestors, my family lineage, the Rodriguezes and the Romeros. As I invoke this, as I pour some water, some libation, some water to cool the earth, as we call our ancestors, I will begin now, and as I do this in your head, out loud, however you want to do it, invoking your ancestors, your blood lineage, those ancestors that we stand on the shoulders of. Aho. Egungun kiki egungun, eguni ku ramramfe, awoku akwipwi, oda son bufole wo, eguni ku batabango, biaba futurina le egun atedeche. Praise to the mediums of the ancestors who have preserved the mystery of the featherless flight. You create the words of reverence and power. The drums of the ancestors announce the arrival of the ancestors. On the strong mat you spread your power. The ancestors are here. The ancestors are here. The ancestors are here. Omi tutu ile tutu ana tutu, tutu egun, tutu orisha, tutu echu. Asheo, asheo, asheo. Oho. Itaku oyasi. Thank you, ancestors.
Thank you, Fidel. So my name is Darcy Ottey. I'm one of the co-coordinators with Dane Zahorsky of Youth Passageways. And I want to welcome you all to the first ever Youth Passageways webinar. So we're all going to be learning as we go about this technology and how it works and how it doesn't work for us. If it's possible for you to mute yourself, please do. And I'm trying to go through and mute folks as well so that we don't have background noise on the call. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here and make this space. And I want to sort of add to Fidel's prayer, a prayer myself. just that this webinar begins to build a field of trust amongst those of us who are going to be gathering here in April soon. For many of us, there is already a strong field of trust, and there are many new folks to the Youth Passageways Network that are just coming in and will be kind of engaging with the group for the first time. And it was the hope of the Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group and those, the Stewardship Council and those who will be on the ground hosting us in LA, that this call could really begin to set the tone and set the field for the work that we're going to do. So a little bit about me, as I mentioned, I'm the co-coordinator of Youth Passageways. I live in the Methow Valley in Washington State. And my cultural background is primarily ancestry from Britain, as well as from along with Ramon Parish, who's on this call, who will introduce himself. Hi, Ramon. And Sobey Wing, who is also on the Stewardship Council for Youth Passageways. And Fidel is also going to be presenting along with the three of us that currently make up the Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group, and Luis Rodriquez, who is one of the hosts welcoming us to LA and will be one of the MCs for the gathering and has been really instrumental in helping to pull it off, as has Fidel. On this call, we will be really talking about three things. You know, the real intention here is to kind of bring us up to speed and sort of moving forward in the same direction together. So first we'll be kind of providing an overview of Youth Passageways. And within that, who is Youth Passageways, how did we come to be, and why is the Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group an important part of what we're doing? Why is that, you know, the one webinar that's happening in preparation for this gathering? Then we'll really talk about the work that's gone on over the past few years in the Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group, why it exists, how it exists, and kind of what's come out of it so far. And then some thoughts and questions moving forward that are really the heart of the work that group is engaged in at this time. And then we're going to talk specifically about the gathering that's coming up in just a few weeks and offer you a few thoughts and a few homework assignments to take into your preparation for the next few weeks. And then we'll have a few comments from Luis and open it up for a few comments from folks that are on the call as well. We might have time for a few questions, and then we'll just talk briefly about next steps. For those of you that are on a computer, you're welcome to put questions or comments in the chat box, and everyone else who's on the computer will see that. And Dane Zahorsky, co-coordinator with me, will be capturing that and making those questions available to the wider network, as well as you know, we won't have time necessarily. There's many, many hours worth of work that could go into this call, but Jane will be taking those questions, and that will provide the Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group, which is CCP for short, the opportunity to try and get you more information between now and the gathering, take your thoughts and comments and feedback kind of into our dreamings and preparation for the gathering. And then also, hopefully, we'll have some real time to engage with it when we're at the gathering. This is not the best format for a participatory discussion with everybody that's on the call. Plus, our hope is that folks that were not able to join us tonight will be listening in the future. So in that way, I don't think it's a great format to really model how Youth Passageways comes together, which is very much collaborative and participatory. But our hope on this call is really to share with you the thinking that's gone into the preparations and bring you up to speed so that we all can be really participating and collaborating on the conversation moving forward. So we'll share with you at the end how you can offer feedback and sort of get your thoughts into the mix. And And we really hope that you will join into this conversation with us. Sobey, Ramon, Fidel, Luis, do you have anything to add?
No.
All right. So I'm going to take a sip of water and then keep going. Like I said, this webinar is a really important moment for the network and for the work of the Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group, which has been kind of behind the scenes doing our work and sharing with the Stewardship Council and trying to share more broadly with the network, but we haven't really publicly spoken about what we're doing in quite this way. So wanting to share with you just a little bit of context about the Youth Passageways Network and our history. And most people on this call, I think, have this background, but wanting to just rehearse together a little bit of the story. So, and there's a beautiful, I think a really beautiful, right?
Breaking up a touch, Darcy.
This, community has been constellating. I'm breaking up? Okay, thank you. This community has been constellating for quite some time as, folks around the world have both been working very hard to preserve cultural traditions and rites of passage despite the many, many challenges and breakdown of cultural traditions that have happened around the world through genocide and slavery and all of the impact that's happened on indigenous communities around the world. And so many rite of passage traditions have survived intact or somewhat intact, and communities have worked hard to preserve them. And many communities have really lost those traditions. As we all know, I think that this is a story that most, if not all, people on this call understand. And cross-culturally, folks have been sharing and exploring how rites of passage take place within the modern world for quite some time, and how do these traditions come back, and how are they preserved, within the struggles that we all face. And the history of youth passage rose, but there's a particular moment that we understand within the Youth Passageways Network that's really key to our founding, and that was in 2008, when a group of about 100 practitioners came together on the Big Island of Hawaii. Thanks to the efforts of many people, and two names I really feel to mention here are Melissa Michaels and Joshua Gorman, who are very much the visionaries and center to bring together this group of people. And that gathering, if you haven't heard the story of it, I encourage you to talk with folks that were there. Ramon Parish, Gigi Coyle, myself, many folks will be at the gathering, and they'll be invited. Luis Rodriguez, they will be invited to stand up and make themselves known. And for many of us, it was a beautiful opportunity to come together with peers engaged in the work of initiation, as well as elders and youngers, and really get our eyes wide open about the broad range of efforts that are really dedicated to our young people at this time. And it was a very challenging gathering. And a lot of cross-cultural conflict arose, and a lot of just challenges of protocol and how do we come together across values and across differences in service to all of the young people in our communities. So after that gathering, and relationships were formed and some dreamings went into an organization, but things really lay fallow for a while. A few years later, and sort of meanwhile, Frederick Marx, as another kind of really important seed planter and visionary in the network, was having conversations with other folks and really dreaming into this film that was related to rites of passage. And at some point, these threads converged. And Frederick really held a vision that despite the challenges that had happened in Hawaii, that he felt it was so important to gather folks invested in initiating our young people and bring them together, and really with the idea of, we referred to it as an umbrella bowl organization, a container and an umbrella, something that sort of surrounded it that would be in service to youth initiation. And so a small group gathered in Oakland, California, about 30 folks in April 2012. And that gathering was extremely successful by a range of measures, and a strong commitment was held that this group would regather, which it did with a larger group hosted by the Ojai Foundation. And that event was really brought together by, again, Joshua Gorman, Gigi Coyle, Frederick Marks, and I was also honored to be part of the organizing team for that gathering in April 2013. And that was where a group of 65 folks really said, yes, we are creating something. We want an entity that will house our collective efforts. And out of that, Youth Passageways was then born in a smaller circle on our official birth date in November 2013. And since then, we've been really laying the organizational groundwork for this group of people that comes together both as a group of practitioners to learn from one another, to share with one another, and to really understand the full breadth of what we're all offering, to strengthen the work that each of us are doing and really build relationships, as well as to use our collective energy to really get the word out in the broader world about the importance of youth initiation and what this movement is and what it has to offer in its many different faces. And throughout the process, you know, the first gathering in 2008 in Hawaii, in the fall of 2008 in Hawaii, and through in Oakland, and through in Ojai, and through in the smaller convenings that have happened since, there's been a really strong recognition that at the heart of the work that Youth Passageways is engaged in is the work of transforming our culture. And so that work really, it extends beyond just young people, but really it's all life transitions, and it extends beyond just what is now called the United States or Turtle Island or North America, but it's a worldwide movement as well. And also the recognition that we can't do everything, and that we do have to be thoughtful and strategic and laser focused in our efforts. And so with that, and trying to really be clear on, you know, that our work is about youth initiation, at this time, that's really the piece of the puzzle that we're tackling, but that in order to really further that movement in that field, we need to really be able to come together and come together across differences and in a way that honors each of our backgrounds and each of our lineages and what all of us have to offer and bring to bear, and in a way that brings healing and trust, not a further breakdown. And for the Youth Passageways Network, that's meant the commitment to supporting the work of this cross-cultural protocols working group in really solidifying an infrastructure and shared agreements and shared processes that can make sure that everybody's voice can be heard in this network. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Sobey.
Thank you, Darcy. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sobey Wing. I'm a member of the Youth Passageways Board, or the Stewardship Council as we call it, and have been part of the inception of the organization, having attended the conference in Ojai that was my entry point before we had the name Youth Passageways. I'm also on the cross-cultural protocol group, and I am also, which is something that I started, in an unnamed way. I started creating a little think tank around this kind of stuff after our gathering in Ojai. And I am also part of another organization where I am based in the unceded Coast Salish territories, also known as Vancouver. It's called Katara Filipino Indigenous Arts Collective, and I'm also a board member with that. And that services Filipino diaspora in this area, and I've also in the past served with Teen Journey, which is another Vancouver-based program. And I've had the pleasure to also mentor and participate in other programs in our network as a sort of field research, including Melissa Michaels' program that also Ramon is a part of, and then also including the Australian Rites of Passage program that Arna is part of. And I'm located, as I said, in Vancouver. I'm born in Toronto, and my cultural background, my ancestry goes on my mother's side to so-called Philippines, to Spanish descent through colonization, and also on my dad's side to China and France. And yeah, I'm also going to introduce Ramon in a minute, but I just want to talk quickly about the nature of what we're talking about today. As has already been said, is an area of sensitivity, and I certainly don't, and I don't think the CCP claims to be the final authority or to have it all wrapped up and understood this subject matter. And really, what we are trying to do is create a open-ended questions that lead to more ways to look at these areas that will also help us to be on a more level footing with each other when we come into physical eye-to-eye contact in April. And I'd like to say that that no change occurs without discomfort, and so this is something that, as a CCP member, I feel like it's really been true, and I think it's true to what we experience, many of us, in the Rites of Passage work that we do, and that with that discomfort, a lot of growth can occur. And I also just want to preface, whatever we're talking about as being triggering potentially all the way around, whether you be, whatever your background, it's going to have varying reasons why it could be triggering, but it's for us to open up critical thinking, and to do this, I'd like to just suggest, if you, whether you're on the call now or you're listening to the recording, if you want to record privately any feelings you might have that come up during this call for yourself, just to track how you're doing, that might be valuable. And if you choose to share that in the discussions on the forum that we're going to talk about later, any questions or comments, that's also welcome. But we do really feel it's important for everyone to feel like they're being heard or have a chance to be heard. So I want to apologize from the offset that if anything I say is offensive or is taken the wrong way, that my intention is not to do that, but it's really just in this discomfort that amounts to learning. And what we're talking about is something that I think about every day, and it's at the same time something that, I'm always looking at different opinions and forming my view. And within the CCP, we operate in a consensus fashion, and so, it's going to be a challenge for us to form complete agreements even within our small numbers, but the area is rich for learning. So with that in mind, I just want to pass the floor now to another member of the CCP, Ramon Parish, and I'll allow him to introduce himself.
Hey, so I'm Ramon Parish. I live in the Denver, Boulder, Colorado area. I grew up here. I was born out in the Bay Area of California. I am ancestrally, I'm African American, which is a sort of paradox or question there, because beyond the Americas, I'm not sure where my ancestors come from. I assume Western Africa. So, that's like the kind of the reason why Malcolm X had the X on the back of his name. It was X like an equation, like an unknown. So, African background, African American. I am a father and a husband, and I'm in a multiracial, multicultural, multi-faith marriage. And so that, in a way, forms the background of why I'm concerned with the questions. I live in them. I'm an instructor at Naropa University. I teach some of their diversity seminars, some of their service learning, little environmental studies. And I'm also a student and colleague of Melissa Michaels, and she has grown this Boulder-based but national and international serving organization that works with movement and dance and somatic psychology and expressive arts to create rites of passage and initiatory experiences for young people from around the world. And so, yeah, that was really my entrance into the Youth Passageways organization. I'm one of the Stewardship Council members, and I'm also a member of the CCP. Can y'all hear me? Okay. And so I want to say a little bit about the CCP's, how it came to be, and some of the work that we've done, and kind of the purpose of the CCP. So Darcy spoke a bit about some of the early gatherings that seeded the Youth Passageways organization, and some of the difficulties and some of the issues and some of the splinters that we ran into. And there was a gathering in 2008 in Hawaii, and there were, in some ways some clashes around maybe different perceptions around time and protocol. And then there was a gathering in 2013, I believe, in Ojai, and there we really encountered some questions around the use of particular rituals, specifically sweat lodge rituals, and who sort of was like a legitimate carrier of the sweat lodge ritual. And after that gathering, it really landed with the Youth Passageways organization that the cultural dimension of our work as youth workers and rites of passage workers, that this was a critical dimension of our work, and it was critical in the ways that, part of the purpose of Youth Passageways is to really gather the strengths and the different skills and modalities and the different communities that we serve, to gather all these different groups together and see what we can learn from each other, and see how our strengths can build on one another, and see how we can mutually support one another, and potentially to really create a network where we can have youth have different types of initiatory experiences. And what we found is when we brought this diverse network of people together, it generated a lot of tension because, those tensions exist between our communities in the first place. So anytime people from different backgrounds, different racial, cultural backgrounds come together, those tensions are going to show up. And that's just kind of standard diversity training 101, is anytime you get people from different backgrounds together, different social identity locations, different power, access to power and privilege, that stuff's all going to show up in the room. And on top of that, part of our work as practitioners is to really be passing on cultural practices and passing on culture. And some of our practitioners were coming from frameworks that were culturally specific. Some of our practitioners were coming from frameworks where they were trying to revive ancestral practices. Some were coming from places of cultural innovation where they were kind of trying to create new practices. And so there was a lot of questions around how we become carriers and you know, folks that pass on particular cultural and religious traditions, and how we inherited those traditions in the first place. So a group of us, of the members of the Stewardship Council, came together to really inquire about what are some of the regular conflicts that we run into, and what are some of the best practices in order to engage those conflicts and to help us work through them and to help us harvest the useful and the creative, you know, issues and situations that show up in those conflicts. So that was kind of the beginning of the CCP. And in 2014, a group of about 12 of us came together in Ojai, California for a number of days, and we sat down to really see if we could, between us, develop a document that would lay down some of these best practices, some of these principles, and some of these questions that we think that the movement as a whole should contemplate and that we invite the movement to adopt. And so that was the genesis of the cross-cultural protocol document. It's a living document. You know, what we have set down is something that we hope constantly evolves based off of interaction and feedback from different members of the network. But we set down, from what we could see, and, you know, our group was made up of, you know, African-American, Anglo or white American, indigenous to the Americas, you know, people from mixed backgrounds, so on. It was a fairly diverse group. And, you know, there was a fairly wide range of ages represented as well. And so we came up with a number of principles. And that was, that's that cross-cultural protocols working document that hopefully you all have had a chance to look at before coming on to this call. And so, again, just to reiterate, and if I'm missing anything, Darcy or Fidel or Sobey, please let me know. Just to reiterate, you know, these, the cross-cultural protocols there are agreements that we as Youth Passageways are striving for, and that we're striving to operate under these agreements. And the specific organization, Youth Passageways, is inviting its network partners to consider these principles and to consider adopting them. So it's really in the spirit of an invitation. It's really in the spirit of contemplation, and, you know, to take these principles in and look out into your work and your communities and your contact with other communities, and to see if these dynamics arise, and to see if these principles and these practices are helpful in navigating those dynamics. So yeah.
So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about we're working on a mandate and process, and it's not fully adopted yet. We're bringing this to our Stewardship Council, but I just want to give a little bit of a sense of, you know, from what you've heard about us, what do we actually do, and how could you potentially be involved, because we are looking to add a small number of people this year. So you might be interested in this work, and so things that we might do, and I'll let you jump in whenever you want if anybody wants to add Ramon or Darcy, but one of the things we do is we navigate this ever-transforming intercultural, ethnic, and gender-based area of conflict. And so, there's a very strong anti-oppression lens that looks at all marginalized voices and seeks to center those voices so that we can learn from them. So we are a think tank, we're a body of researchers, we seek to consult with Indigenous academics and scholars and activists and wisdom keepers, and we are really trying to get at questions like, one of the big ones would be, how did we lose rites of passage cross-culturally, and how are those being brought back? We are also looking at how we can handle when these kind of things flare up in our network, and how can we support so that the damage from any kind of thing like that on a public scale can be tended well and with the support of our network, because we're all learning. And in that way, we can also preemptively or after the fact be consultants and potential trainers and work with other groups that may know pieces that we need to learn as well, so that it's really an ongoing learning process. And ultimately, in the long run, in the absence of us being initiated, many of us in any traditional manner, or having elders, we will eventually, hopefully, be able to increase the number of elders that we can reach out to, and particularly Indigenous ones, in such a way where they feel welcome. And by that I mean like not tokenized and not brought in a way where it's like for our benefit exclusive to them, but more in a mutual kind of binding way, in an intercultural and intergenerational allyship where we're performing as good allies to Indigenous peoples on the lands and waters where we are. And to do this work, we're meeting approximately once a month or as frequently as needed, depending on our active projects. And we do this on Google Hangout sometimes. And there may be that we are going to meet up, once a year or more if needed. And so this is something that we're also, trying to increase representation in the LGBTQIA community, trying to maintain a representation in our group that reflects intergenerational and gender balance, as well as non-binary gender identities. And the prerequisite is that you've attended one of our network gatherings and are a partner on our network and have attended at least 3 of our CCP meetings as a witness. I'm just looking at the time right now. I think we want to look now into, you can look at our living guiding principles, between now and the gathering, and certainly what we intend of it is food for thought. But I just want to narrow in on a few key questions that we're holding and leave them kind of open-ended questions as well. And maybe if we have time, we can try to touch on some of them. But some of those things that we're looking at are, what are the key threats to the contemporary rites of passage movement? And what are some of the opportunities that are currently knocking at our collective door? And this is something that, in terms of our group, we've thought about, and I'm just going to share a few pieces and not, this is not definitive, but, the biggest threats that I would just want to name at this point is that we're centering youth in a lot of ways, this organization, this network, and youth are also at the forefront of the critical thought, looking at the injustice, the ways that people are being marginalized. A lot of the people doing that frontline work are youth, and youth of color, Indigenous youth, and we are wanting to be sure that as we move forward, that those people feel that we understand that perspective, because it's becoming a growing part of the dialogue. If you look not only in our kind of rites of passage or youth development field, but in many dimensions of popular culture or ranges of culture. So keeping up to speed with what's going on in that front in anti-oppression, social justice related ways that relate to our work by the nature of how, rites of passage are one of the first targets of colonization and the loss of connection, indigenous connection to their identities has been through, the loss of rites of passage, and that was the mechanism, just speaking broadly, and how these injustices that the youth and people that we're hearing in the media, all these Black Lives Matter movements, and many of the anti-oppression movements are all rooted in the same root cause. And so this is a question we ask as well, as like, how did we lose these rites of passage? So there's a very direct connection between that question and the threat that we have if we proceed in a way that doesn't show that we have that historical understanding. It is also, very much an opportunity to build relationship. And, I was talking to an Indigenous friend of mine who works with an Indigenous youth organization, and, one of the most important things we kind of came to agreement on is that the most hopeful thing we could be doing from organization to Indigenous organization is building relationships, and considering the fact that most of the work that is being done in our movement, in our network, is taking place on Indigenous traditional lands, that we are doing most of that as settlers, that becomes, an issue. And it is also an opportunity and something about how we can become the best settlers we can be once we move through potential resistance or denial or those kind of things. If we can collectively get on the page of understanding enough that we can become the best settlers we can be, then that is relationship building, and that is counter to the threat, which would be, closing the doors and creating a distrust that is hard to heal, which is a common thing that is experienced and hard to repair. Sorry, I'm kind of flipping back and forth here. I'm going to bring us back to the questions. And if Ramon, if you want to take any of these questions, feel free to join in as well.
Sure. Okay. Another question is, how do we, as an emerging movement, work together, holding firm to our core value of healthy family while holding and honoring the full range of our diversity and perspectives? So, yeah, how do we stay unified without crushing dissenting voices, without dissenting voices seeming divisive? How do we keep feeding our difference back into the common center? What are some of the sources of the conflicts that arise in our work as practitioners when we come together across differences? And what resources are available to prevent harm, address conflicts in ways that move towards cultural healing? This is part of the CCP's role as researchers. We're really looking for best practices in terms of social justice, anti-oppression, conflict resolution, restoration, reparations. There's a lot of research there that we're doing, and we're really, looking around, looking in our own traditions, looking into things that come up between us as a small working group and people from different backgrounds. what are the tools of healing and of conflict transformation that exist? And then, I don't know, do you want to do the last one, Sobey?
Yeah. What is cultural appropriation, and why is understanding this concept important to the work of Rites of Passage practitioners? So that is a huge topic, but it actually is a very valuable starting point, as you heard in the conversation earlier about how that was kind of a spark. And just, to really succinctly, I guess, kind of address that, cultural appropriation is also called cultural theft. And one thing that, is more the issue than the borrowing and taking of different cultures, which is, we can see that cultures intermingle, and that's kind of a normal part of all cultures. But it is more the problem with racism, imperialism, white supremacy, and colonialism that bring out some of the tensions and the challenges here. And it's about power relations between cultures. And so when we see this surface as a conflict, it's really important for us to understand the underlying root of what that conflict is, and not to view it as its own, isolated thing. And that's all I'll really say about that for now, just because of time. But as far as, a network, it's good for us to think about this question, and why is this important for us to think about and develop some sort of protocols around, and particularly in the instance where we're being asked by Indigenous people to refrain from doing these things. I'm going to pass this back to Darcy now, and just have her segue us into this next section.
Great, thanks, Sobey, and thanks, Ramon. So I just, as somebody who's been kind of part of the cross-cultural protocols working group and working with this, I just want to kind of offer just a couple more thoughts and a couple quick stories too. So, one thing I want to just say really quick is, the CCP, the protocols document, the guiding principles document, is really offered as a resource. I have spent a number of years as an executive director and program designer, facilitator of Rite of Passage experiences, and I dreamed of a resource like this, not as a prescription of how I should do something, but as a collective best thinking. And I just, a few days ago, just to ground this in an example of how this document has been used by others, received a call from a man who is involved with a Rite of Passage program out of North Carolina, who was like, how do we do with money? Like, what are we supposed to do about taking money? And is it okay to take money for ceremony, or is it not? And it felt amazing to me to be able to refer him both to the way some of our partners think about it and our best thinking to date for questions that he might consider around the ethics of money in relationship to initiatory work with young people. And so that's just a small example of the practical application where this is not a prescription for what our partners must do, but the kind of best thinking, community thinking to date for folks to really take and apply to them. And I want to also just really name that this gathering is our first time of really living into how this document might be used as a community. And we're already as a CCP body not satisfied with the protocols as they're written, and we're kind of working them, and especially right now through an LGBTQ lens, how does this apply? How are we holding that perspective, as well as a number of other kind of places where the thinking has evolved over the last year. But it is what we have on paper and sort of have as the shared foundation for us to come together to really say, at the Ojai gathering on day 3, there was this sign up about, you know, this breakout group that would be meeting to discuss culture and rites of passage. And there was a question of, is that a safe place to talk about cultural appropriation and rites of passage? And so the real intention and the foundation here is to really just put the elephant in the room before we even gather and say, yes, there's many things that we will be talking about at this gathering on a broad range of topics. And this one will be welcome at the table. And this is going to be a safe place for us to talk about some of those questions and collectively extend the work for each of us as individuals within our communities, and then for our collective body of the Youth Passageways Network. So with that, I just want to share really quickly, you know, what's kind of emerged as the theme for the gathering when we come together in April. And there's kind of 2 pieces of this. There's some broader intentions that we're holding that have grown out of the work of the design and facilitation team, which has been meeting for almost a year now to plan this gathering. And so the 3 intentions, and you all have seen this, but just to name, is listening to the voices of our ancestors, tending to the humanity of our circle, and amplifying the movement. So really holding those 3 intentions in the design and the purpose for us coming together. And there's this guiding metaphor that's really evolving into the theme. And this I heard first voiced by Luis when a gathering of LA host partners and the Youth Passageways Stewardship Council had an opportunity to meet last November. And Luis offered this metaphor of a house. And, you know, this kind of house that we maybe think of as Western civilization or empire, or we all have many names for this kind of society that we live in, and we see cracks in the foundation and the walls falling down on us, and some of our communities feel that more strongly than others, but there is this house that we are living in that is affected by climate change and all of these assorted factors. And the work that we're doing, and please forgive me if I'm totally botching your metaphor here, Luis, but the work is really building this house inside the house so that when that one around collapses around us, we have a solid new infrastructure in place. And so we on the design team have been really thinking about that and really looking at this gathering as, you know, the last gathering in 2013, we committed that we're going to do this together, and a number of us have been building blueprints and playing around with some different ideas, and so this gathering is really about building our foundation together. So with that, I would love to turn it over to you, Fidel and Sobey, to talk about the gathering and work moving forward into this gathering.
Go ahead. Open that up, sir.
Sure. Yeah. I want to reiterate that that principle in our cross-cultural protocol around, or actually in our values around the healthy family that we're trying to create. And you know, I think a healthy family in the context of rites of passage, you know, really needs to start from the place of the ancestors. And so this is something we're really feeding into this gathering in a strong way as a very central part of it. Yes, the youth are definitely central, but all of us collectively root down into our ancestors. And with their support, as they're standing with us right now, you know, with their support, we can accomplish something that we haven't seen in the world before, something that this movement is hopefully ready to take another step and move forward with. So we're actually wanting to issue at this point in time some homework, some ancestral research, and you know, we'll be bringing forward in the coming weeks more ideas about this and more resources about what this could entail. but we're going to be wanting people to bring something that represents their ancestors to place on a collective altar to our ancestors. And if you want to add anything to that, Fidel, please do.
Yeah, so I want to just piggyback on what Sobey said. So we also want it not just to be a representation of your ancestry, say it's, you know, Chumash or Hopi or Celtic or what have you, but even more importantly, bringing something that represents your family lineage. You know, be it your grandmother who has passed on to the spirit world, a picture of her, or the name of your grandfather, or an aunt that passed. We're talking about your bloodline. Some of the discussions we had talked about in honoring the ancestors, and one of the things that I had brought up and a few of us have talked about is the acknowledgement of our bloodline, which does obviously represent our culture, but our own ancestors are the ones that we call on to help us, our bloodline. So bringing, if you bring a picture, there will be a community altar that's built at the gathering. Bring a photo, but make sure that photo doesn't have anybody else in it that's alive or that is not deceased, should I say, and it should just be that person. Or it could be a representation. Maybe your grandfather used to smoke pipes, and you have his pipe at your house. You can bring that to represent them. It can be anything that is connected to their spirit. So we want to also not only invoke the ancestry of our culture and our people, but also our bloodline. So we're kind of asking people to do that. That's the homework of researching not only culturally your ancestry, but your bloodline. People within your family that you want to honor and bring into this collective. So when we're talking about honoring our ancestry and acknowledging them, that's the biggest thing. We're talking about acknowledgement. So when the discussion about the cross-cultural protocols was, you know, when you bring people from different ethnic groups, you're going to have a bunch of issues because there's a lot of acknowledgement of all these atrocities that have happened aren't acknowledged. So when we bring all these people together, there's tension. There's a hidden tension. There's this elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, and there's hidden anger behind all that. And so acknowledgement needs to occur. So first and foremost, let's acknowledge our ancestors, our bloodline. Let's acknowledge that again, we're back to standing on the shoulders of them. So that was probably longer than what you needed, Sobey, but essentially that's the homework. Dig into your family lineage and bring a representation of that bloodline to the gathering, and we'll have more stuff sent out through emails about that.
Yeah, I actually want to add a little more onto that because yes, our bloodline for sure is what we want to focus on. I think our ancestors of rites of passage too would be, you know, something that I think would really be supportive for us to, you know, help us get more understanding. You know, we can even be praying to our ancestors to help us find out more about how did we lose our connection to rites of passage from our ancestral backgrounds. And this could be a really rich zone for shared understanding as well as we come to know more of that lost history. I know I'm doing that in my, you know, Filipino roots, and there's so much things I learn when I hear from other people cross-culturally about their shared histories. And so this really is an important layer of research that the CCP is very interested in developing, I think. And I think also just a caveat perhaps that, you know, we want to leave out ancestors who might be against the work we're doing. We want to kind of keep the ones that hold the love and the support for what we're doing. But yes, this is a rich zone, and we're going to be sharing all kinds of ways for people who perhaps have never looked into this before to get a few inroads onto this. So before we even come together, I think people will have grown quite a bit, and it's a door that once opened, you know, it really, you can't close it. It is a rite of passage, re-ancestralization. And since Fidel, because you and also Luis is part of your ancestors go to the land where we're going to be gathering, I was hoping that you could share some knowledge about issues that are contemporary circumstances and issues that are being faced by the people of the land in Los Angeles where we're gathering, or even more specific, you know, the Malibu area where we're going to be gathering.
You want to start that off, Luis? Is he still on?
I think he's probably just unmuting right now.
Okay.
Are you there, Luis?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So one thing is that this city happens to have the largest urban Native population, Native American population, 250,000 people from all over the country, tribes and reservations from, you know, all over. So we have that issue of the urban Native community, which needs to be addressed because they're also losing a lot of their culture. They're tied to their culture. That's a big issue. As many of them have the same issues as any urban young person has today. The other issue is the large number of Mexicans and Central Americans who are Native, who are recognized as such, including Mayan-speaking people from Mexico and Guatemala and other countries, Mixteco, Zapoteco, Huichol. There's a number of tribes. We know a number of them, Tarahumara, that are here. They don't even speak Spanish, let alone English. They're called Hispanics, even though they have no real Spanish, you know, blood other than, you know, they're Hispanicized sometimes. But so that is millions of people. In other words, this is a very important Native-rooted city that doesn't always get recognized. So one is to recognize the people that are here, the Tongva, the Totavian, Chumas, other tribal people who are still active, still alive, and still very much doing ceremonies. And it also recognized all these, there's millions of people that have come from all these other countries, mostly Mexico, Central America, that are Native. And I think that's another thing, because many of them are going back to their Native roots, as you all know. So I just think that's something to acknowledge about LA and Native peoples.
I don't know if I need to add any more than that. Unless you guys want to, you know, I mean, some of the things that I see some of the questions that were talked about, an ongoing need to address regarding the mission schools period. I think in LA too, along with the number of indigenous people that are here, there's also this huge historical amnesia for the indigenous people here in LA. And that's not even to include the indigenous coming from Central America and South America that live here. And there's a huge romanticism of that conquest. And you'll see it all over LA when you come here. You'll see statues of Junipero Serra, who basically annihilated all California indigenous people. It is mandatory that every fourth grader in the public school system in California build a mission. So it's like asking a Jewish kid to build Auschwitz in the fourth grade. And so that's policy. That's a policy that's here. You have, again, many symbols of this clash of cultures that existed here with the mission period. I also highly recommend you could read Cross of Thorns. It's a pretty transparent description of the mission period, and then the post-mission period of 1848 and onwards. There's a book out there called Murder State that basically documents and gives you data of the thousands upon thousands of Native people that died during the Americanizing of the West of California, so to speak. So it's an interesting place, and again, I use that term historical amnesia because it's not talked about in the school system. You usually have to start digging and getting this type of information from people like Luis, who are on the line, and other forms of elders that have gone through this process of decolonizing their minds and searching for the truth. So it's kind of auspicious, and I think it's a good thing that we're doing it here in LA. But there's a lot of history here, and there's a lot of negative stuff that has happened here pertaining to colonizing, but there's also some beauty. There's a lot more beauty, I want to say, too. There's people doing a lot of things all over LA. There's a lot of ceremonies going on in LA, and it's such a huge place. There's 18 million people in LA County. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here that I don't know about. I'm sure that Luis doesn't know about. But I definitely suggest doing a little bit of research prior to coming to understand that dynamics. And I'm talking about the colonization period, both with Spanish and then the Americans. And I can send those books to you, Darcy. You can send them out on an email if you want to give a little book list for people to kind of understand those dynamics.
Thank you. I would just like to throw in a footnote, and it's not my place of where I am based, but just from my understanding, just to name it, there's in the contemporary situation, there's a lot of disenrollment going on, which I know both Fidel and Luis could talk about in more detail, but people can maybe also research this. And this really relates to rites of passage too, because as a disenrolled Native person, that means that I'm not saying that it means you can't access rites of passage. That was made clear to me, but it can mean that, and it also could mean that people aren't accessing services and things like that generally. And that rites of passage across California, because of the issues around getting recognition as tribes, has also meant that it's harder to protect the lands where they traditionally do their rites of passage. And I think this is something for all of us, wherever we live, as settlers especially, to consider. How has displacement, how has disruption by colonization affected Native youth's ability to access rites of passage, especially considering the fact that across the world, Indigenous people suffer, not that this is a contest or anything, but that the level of suicide ranks highest in Indigenous communities, or even just in Indigenous populations. So that is something for us to definitely hold in our thoughts. And I think at this point, I'd like to move forward and invite Luis to share some comments for us right now.
Well, thank you. I just want to just be brief, but I do think it's important for me for rites of passage and initiation to really be about the awakening of a person as well as the community. Awakening to its own genius, its own dream, the life that a person was meant to live, as well as the community waking up to what a young person represents for everyone. And I think the reason we want to resurrect and renew rites of passage is because we suffered so disconnected, alienated young people from older people. There's no mentors in our communities. There's so much division based on race, on class, on gender, sexual orientation. That this culture is a divisive culture. It feeds off the divisions. It feeds on everybody's differences instead of honoring the differences and finding what's common between us. So I think initiation is something that can bring back the humanity that's been missing in the culture. Like, it's not about somebody trying to get a career. I'm not against any of that, or trying to build themselves up in a certain level of society. It's about them recognizing what propensities, what purposes they bring to the world, and how they can be honored and respected and allowed to thrive. And so I just want to mention that because to me, this conference is an opening to kind of reimagining everything. Everything's in crisis for a reason. I think that's what 2012 was really trying to say. Everything's in crisis, including religious groups, including old rites of passage, including traditional. Everybody's in crisis, but that's a good thing. It's in crisis because something has to die and something new has to be reborn. And I think that's where we're at. What is it that has to go away? What is it that we have to be consciously subjugating? But at the same time, what is it that has to be renewed, regenerated, where it has to come out? And I think that's what I see this whole event is for us to explore that and look at where the crisis is kind of leading us. What's the hint that nature and the spiritual world has given us to go forward?
Thank you, Luis. So we have a little bit of time left, and if any of the listeners would like to share any reflections or feedback, we can give a few minutes for some witness comments or questions, even open-ended questions.
Yeah, and so two things I'd love to add here. One is that we're going to try an experiment, and I'm going to unmute folks. So especially if you're not on a headset, there's an echo when folks are not on a headset and are on some sort of speakerphone. If you can mute on your end, that would be great, and we'll see how that goes. And I would offer just a quick comment on the witness comments, which is, Youth Passageways operates with a spiral governance structure of leadership. So that means the seats and not the people are really what's important, recognizing the roles and not the bodies that are occupying that role at any given moment, but knowing that people will flow in and out, and that we always really maintain an intention in all Youth Passageways meeting that there's an empty space for someone who really feels called to join in any particular conversation, and for the voices of those that aren't present. And also we have a practice, and you'll see this at the gathering, of really inviting comments from that witness space, that observer space. So short comments, but really inviting those reflections or questions. And I'm going through and unmuting now. So
I'm going to test out whether I have been unmuted. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hey,
yes.
Everybody, this is Kruti, and I'm in Los Angeles, and I had to pull over as the sun is setting. And how timely to do that, as Luis is kind of grounding us for the gathering. But I just wanted to share that I think that everything that was mentioned was really significant and important and in context. And because I'm in Los Angeles, I just wanted to share that there's a lot of death and incarceration as generations of the communities that are indigenous to LA have experienced, and really looking forward to sort of turning that upside down in its head in April as people come to envision something different. So really looking forward to it. Thank you all so much.
Is that me?
That is you.
This is Grant Abert. I'm also a member of the Stewardship Council of Youth Passageways. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm tremendously impressed and grateful for this webinar. I think it's critically important to the work that we're trying to do together. Both as in an internal, organization and how we manage ourselves together, but also as an aspirational network, calling out to a very diverse set of practitioners, and finding that common ground that we can stand on together as we build this movement. So thank you very much.
is Melissa. Greetings to you all. I may need to say this many times, but for today, I am so deeply moved by the well-being of this community and the humble and generous presence and intelligence that everybody has brought to this really raw and hard conversation, and to bear witness to the arc of where we began as we chose to come together in this life and begin to rebuild the fabric to where we are now as we set sail into this next gathering is really remarkable and miraculous, and the result of so many people's steadfast and brave work. And I just want to say thank you, the field of respect and trust that you intended to begin to amplify for all of us feels like it's really being laid. Deep, deep bow and so much love. Thank you.
Hello. I don't know if y'all can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, great. My name is Pinar, and yeah, I just want to share that usually my experience as like a person of color is to have like my body feel really like tight and like on guard. And I just noticed my like nervous system like calming down as this conversation was happening. So I just want to thank you for everything that's been shared and a lot of the, the naming of the discomfort that comes up in this conversation and like the intelligence of our bodies to be able to like be with us through that. And yeah, just feeling a lot of gratitude for just, yeah, leaning into like that discomfort. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for that.
Thank you, Pinar.
Are there any last comments? So I'd like to just, Fidel, Luis, Ramon, Sobey, any final words that you would like to offer, and then I'll kind of close us out and share next steps.
But this is Luis, and I just want to say that, somebody mentioned how hard this work is, and that is so true, but it's the beauty, it's the work that we have to do. It's beautiful work. It's that beautiful struggle that Martin Luther King talked about. It's going to be a struggle, but I'm just honored to be part of this, to even be in the table. And I think there's going to be conflict, and some of it is going to be artificial, some is going to be real, but I really hope that we're prepared for anything that comes up, and then also have the compassion and love of community and each other to take us through where we need to go. So I just want to say how important it is that people show up, participate, be present, fully present, at the same time listening and learning as well as teaching as much as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say as a closing comment, I feel like this call is a tiny reflection of what I hope that we can kind of create in the gathering, where Indigenous voices and people of color really feel welcomed and able to speak to this sensitive area and where we feel like, it's being supported by the allyship of, Euro descent people who are supporting this work. And that framework is what makes it work, is that partnering together, relationship building cross-culturally, and giving space for that often quieter voice that isn't so comfortable speaking out about these kind of topics. And the principle behind that is also sometimes referred to in anti-oppression circles as centering. And that starts with the premise of centering the most marginalized voices, which is an ever changing dynamic, and it's a very fertile ground for understanding, when we listen to those marginalized voices, more nuances and more ways that we can really live into this idea that we're a family. That's when it really becomes a really healthy family, is when we're able to listen to the most hard to hear voices. And I just want to offer too that there are ways that we're looking at, and that I think you can think about between now and then, about how to support people who might feel their triggers come up, who are not on this call, and who who we want them to feel part of this family as well, but we want to also make sure that, we don't lose this delicate thread that we're weaving right now. So thank you all for your attentiveness that allowed us to speak and be heard.
I would love to make a comment. I don't know whether you can hear me or not.
Yes, we can.
This is Edith. Tuesday, I'm in Seattle, and I am so grateful to listen to you. I'm so proud of the work that, I know how hard you've worked, and I just want to let you know that you have a clear message that the world really needs to hear, like right now. When I watch what's going on in the kinds of conversations that are going on in the political and wider social world, I just know how much approaching the challenges that we're facing and trying to build a world that we actually want to live in, that people are just, they're struggling so much to come to terms with this. They want the truth to be spoken, but they're finding people who are giving them a false truth. And anyway, I want to see this on YouTube. I want to see it on your website. I want to start getting this message out. It's brilliant work that you guys have done for the last 18 months or so. So thank you.
Fidel, Ramon, do either of you want to add anything? All right, then I'm going to close us out, and then Fidel will really close us out. Yeah, thanks for everyone's comments and kind words. And I would just really say, for me, this is what we've done collectively as a network. There's so many threads of this story, and everybody on this call is now, like it or not, part of the we that is Youth Passageways that will be coming together. And it's very much, our shared story, whether this is your first moment of connection with Youth Passageways or a connection that extends quite a ways back. And just to offer folks a few things about next steps. One, we really welcome your feedback and your thoughts about this call and questions that you have going into this gathering. You know, both the praise is wonderful to hear and constructive feedback that can help to really strengthen things and make sure that we do arrive at the gathering prepared to continue to build this field of trust and this family that we're sharing together, this foundation that we're building. So invite that feedback privately to my email address, darcy@youthpassageways.org, and I will pass it along to the CCP group and more broadly. Or also really want to put a plug in for our high-low forum and really ask that if you haven't yet, that you go on there, take a look at the folks that have introduced themselves already. There's a number that are on this call. And introduce yourself as well. We really want to create that high-low forum as a space to begin to build our community both before and after the gathering. And, you know, just really recognizing that that's how this network can really come together, is a little bit in person, but a lot over technology. And so really would love you to do that, and any conversation about this forum or questions, that's also a great public space. We invite your feedback both in terms of preparation for the gathering, but also how this format works. The Cross-Cultural Protocols Working Group is planning a larger public webinar coming out of the gathering in April, really to share more broadly some of this work that we've been doing, and then also what comes out of the gathering. So if you have any feedback about this format, that's very welcome as well. And also just wanting to let folks know that my hope is that by this weekend, my hope is Friday, but at least by the end of this weekend, the plan is to have a pre-gathering information packet with some more details about LA, the host partners, as well as the draft agenda for you to take a look at and offer any thoughts and comments. So you can just know that that will be forthcoming by this weekend as well. I think that's it on my end, and it is right on the dot, 30 minutes past the hour. So Fidel, closing words?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to just Edith's words were so perfect. It feels really good to be part of this community. Gives me hope. There's so much stuff that a lot of us have to deal with all across the country, especially when we're working with young people. But obviously we all know the state of the country right now, both politically, financially, dealing with all the different issues, social justice issues that we're all dealing with. So I'm just honored that each and every one of you are on this call. I don't know everybody. But just hearing that there are people out there that also care about these issues, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. I wanted to ask, Darcy, I know you asked me to close with like a prayer, closing words. Luis, as my elder, I just asked for permission to be able to do a closing prayer.
Yes, my brother. Mateo.
So I ask everybody if they close their eyes with the intention. I'm just calling on the Creator, no matter who you call the Creator. We just ask the Creator to please guide each and every one of us that are part of Youth Passageways, any friends, any partners that we have. We ask to please guide each and every one of you. May the Creator bless you. May they bless your family. May you live a healthy life. May good things come to you. May you be prosperous. May you be able to assist yourself and your family and your friends on the road to dignity. May we be able to manifest good things at this Youth Passageways gathering. May blessings come out of it. May we be able to overcome any obstacles that may be put in front of us. May we be able to discuss them with dignity and respect, and be able to walk in the world holding our head up and be able to share with the children and the youth of the world that we work with that it is okay to struggle in life, and it's okay to not have material things if they don't have those things. May we be able to, as adults and elders, walk in the world with dignity so we can model that for the young people in this world. Thank you, Creator. May you continue to bless us with the good things that you do. Mother Earth, thank you so much for everything you've given us. You've given us so much, so much abundance that even at times like this, we don't see that abundance. Thank you so much, Creator. Aho, mitaku o yasin. Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you, you guys. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Peace.